Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for turn 7 of my Ersatz Caen scenario. This will be the final turn in this series because although it's an 8-turn scenario, I've two very compelling reasons for stopping it at the end of this turn. One is that barring a miracle, I feel that the British ability to resist the Germans will essentially be broken by the end of this scenario, and unless that one Cromwell that they have left somehow survives to cause enough chaos, but I doubt that will happen. And the other reason, a more practical, real life one, is that this is my final opportunity to do a recording before I do need to clear the table for other purposes, sadly. So on the one hand, I would have liked to have seen this scenario out to the bitter end, but I suppose a turn doesn't make any difference. And as I say, unless a miracle intervenes, I think it's fairly clear that the British have got the worst of it in this scenario. But let's play through and see what happens, because they may take some of the Germans down with them. So, as always, I have essentially shuffled through the orders phase to save you the bother of waiting while I scratch my head and ah over my positioning, and then use the system to generate the German orders. However, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed the Germans have one more orders token than they did the previous turns. And that is because their card draw at the end of the last turn supply phase gave them tactician, so they have been able to benefit from that. And on the British side, they have one card that they can play at the end of the orders phase, which is effectively now, and that's tea time, hooray! So I do happen to have a damaged infantry unit. Happily, it's that one. It's the fire team which took some fire from Wittmann's Tiger last turn, so I'm going to use tea time to flip them back to their full strength side. May just give them an opportunity to do some mischief, if only to panic the Germans by trying to occupy a square of that objective hex. So the broad overview of the tactical situation: the British have effectively been compressed into this area here, and I think they're going to continue losing ground. The Germans have their positions fully infiltrated, and they're effectively surrounded by a smaller number of units, but very powerful units. So we have the wounded German Panzer IV is still there, but it's still a dangerous beast, because as you remember from the previous turn, it knocked out one of the two Cromwells. The other Panzer IV is down here, and it's got a choice between either squishing that helpless universal carrier or trying to bring the building down around all those poor infantry in there, and that's going to make a mess. Just for clarity, because these are first edition Heroes of Normandy pieces, I am playing with the original Heroes of Normandy rules, as opposed to the Stalingrad rules, even though I'm using Stalingrad scenery. So in Stalingrad, when a building comes down on you, the consequences are bad, but they're not fatal. Whereas in Heroes of Normandy, there was a good chance that your units would be crushed under falling masonry. Not a huge chance, but it can happen. So being stuck inside that rickety building when it comes down round our ears is not a happy thought, which is why there are so many order tokens dotted around there. I'm hoping to save at least some of the guys the agony of that occurrence. Of course, the two German Tigers are here dominating the space there. And of course, a somewhat frustrated but very deadly Panther is driving the British light forces like sheep before it, and the Panzer II, which is damaged but still perfectly serviceable, is tucking in behind it. And for the British, as you can see, the situation's desperate. We're going to try and see what we can do about that, securing that objective, but really, you know, I think we're into a bit of a loser with this one. And of course, there's the only vehicle left that can inflict any damage on the German tanks, and that's that single lonely Cromwell over there. So much for the grand overview. The Germans have the initiative, and they are going to start with their Panzer IV. So, an obvious target for this vehicle, to secure its survival if no other reason, is to bring its main gun to bear and try and kill that Cromwell. Because if they can do that, it's basically game over for the British, I think. Unless someone has any incredible ideas for how I could turn it round. So let's see what happens. It might well end things right here. So they train their gun round and they fire. They roll a 2, which is not enough to penetrate the armour. That Cromwell lives again. Oh, sorry, lives another turn, I should say. However, they can see that Vickers group over there, and they can attempt to machine gun them. So they're going to do that. They roll a 1. Okay, that's actually really good news. So hidden in the ruins, or at least partially undercover, the Vickers heavy machine gun group is fine. That is a wonderful start for the Brits. Now, the question becomes what to do with my Cromwell. Now, I have no hope of penetrating Wittmann's armour, not at that angle, unless I roll a 6, and even then there's no guarantee it'll do anything. I don't have a great angle on the Panther up there, and I don't know, I have a reasonable chance of destroying that Panzer IV, but it's already gone this turn, so I won't really be depriving the Germans of a tactical option because it's already had its go. But there is the benefit that I'll deprive the Germans of 2 order tokens next turn if I destroy it. Not that there's going to be a next turn, but playing as if there would be one. That is a very tough choice, and I wonder what to do. I think at the risk of turning into a fireball when Wittmann bears on us anyway, I am going to go for the surer thing and try and destroy that Panzer IV. So we make our roll, and we only roll a 2, which is not good enough. Okay, that was tragic. So over to the Germans. Now, in theory, were I playing a live German player, they can see there's no armour in the vicinity of that Tiger that is any kind of threat to them. Not that they can draw a clear line of sight to, at any rate. However, they can see that there are British infantry in there. They're not hidden. And they can see that they have an orders token. So it makes sense to try and kill them. They're going to go for a 2-pronged approach with this because, of course, Wittmann's Tiger unit has high explosive shells. So with his machine gun, he's going to play over that infantry team, and then he's going to lob a high explosive onto the building. Because if you recall, they did a huge amount of damage to the structure last turn, and he'll only need the slightest push to turn that whole building into a ruin. So we'll do the machine gunning first. They roll a 2, which is not sufficient to do anything to the infantry. Okay, grand. So they're going to next expend one of the high explosive shell counters, and they are going to attempt to bring this building down. Once again, aiming for the dead center like they did last time. A 3. Okay, so there is some drift. 1, 2. So that lands outside the building. I'm not sure which intersection though, because there's not a direct connection. I think the German player can choose. So the units inside the building are safe, but the blast unfortunately overlaps that poor universal carrier down there, and it's +3 to damage, so that could get nasty. And they get a 6. Boom. So the men in the building are all right, but that poor universal carrier, which was fretting about the Panzer IV that was churning towards it, ends up being killed by something altogether very different. So a pretty good turn for that Tiger. They didn't harm the infantry or the building, but it was quite satisfying to blow up another British vehicle. Sigh. Which one of my carriers was that? Oh, it was the generic one. Okay. Bye-bye, universal carrier. Right, that were nasty. So British second order goes to this unit here, which is it's Colonel Maud and Winnie. Right, 1, 2. Rats, they can't make it this turn. I was hoping to dash whichever units I could down into the fountain, but I think let's just get the good colonel over here in preparation for a future jump, and the faithful Winnie can go with him. I do love the fact that Colonel Maud's awesome bulldog Winnie can come along, and units he accompanies get a bonus to their close combat. It's a pity no German infantry turned up, but if by some miracle they get their hands on Major Gruber, he'd better watch himself. Not that that's much incentive for him to come forward, mind, but hey. Right, back to the Germans. Unit number 3 is just down here. A slightly stymied Panzer IV, whose path through this area is now completely blocked with wreckage, which it could try and ram out of the way, but, why bother? There's a building full of Brits just over there who are begging to be shot at. So he's going to open the ball by opening fire on the building with his main gun first. And in doing that, he gets to roll 2 dice for damage to the structure, which is not fun. And he does it. One of the shots gets through. It takes the building up to its damage threshold of 4, which means with a terrible creak and a groan, the whole lot comes crashing down. Looks like Colonel Maud got out of there at just the right time, methinks. So, yeah. Now, the person with the victim personnel inside the building can rearrange them within the wreckage, but they do have to roll under the old rules to see whether anything bad happens. Actually, do you know what? I think we'll prioritize those who actually have order tokens. So, rolling for Lord Lovat, he's fine. The fire team is fine. The other officer's okay. And the mortar team is not fine. They got squished under the rubble, or some of them did at any rate. Yeah, oh dear, the poor mortar team. They didn't have such an enjoyable experience. And, oh yes, and I believe the rest of you get suppression markers. I might have misremembered that, but I think that was the rule in Heroes of Normandy, that if you were unlucky enough to be present during a cave-in, you also get the suppression markers even if you survive. Now, it could be worse. I mean, you've just had a building rather forcibly dropped on you. So that's no surprise there. Actually, no, let's do that so I can still see what the number is. And then, having brought the building down, Panzer's going to follow up with some machine gun fire. See whether they can finish off the weakened mortar team. Oh, and they get a 5. So that's a total of 9. They're shooting to kill rather than suppress. Oh, and the building's cover level is no match for that. So the already dazed and damaged mortar team is finished off. This is not very encouraging. Not very encouraging at all. And so that horrific turn ends for the British. Right, our turn 3, which just so happens to be the poor fellows in this building anyway. They've got a movement of 4. 1. Oh no, they can't move through that. Oh dear, that was not well planned. Actually, rather than activating Group 3 next, I'm going to get Lord Lovat moving. And he is going to get himself over there. So I'll mark him with an activated marker. Over to the Germans again. And it is the Panther, which is terrifying. Now, it has a choice of 2 targets. It could either go for the other universal carrier, which does have an orders marker, or it could try and kill that Staghound, which doesn't have an orders marker, but would probably be able to cause, actually not even mischief, just make a slight nuisance of itself. Or it could move in closer to try and get a shot on the Cromwell on a future turn, because it knows full well that the Cromwell has already fired this turn, so it's not going to be taking any counter fire from that vehicle. It's an interesting choice for the Germans. I think on balance the best option would be to move, because there's, aside from the Cromwell, there's nothing here that can threaten it. And if it comes round here, it's in a great position to bottle up the units in there and also to block any British move from here. Not that the British would be crazy enough to go for that thing, but here we are. So 1, 2. That's actually quite a good position because it presents its stronger front or side armour to anything that'll be in its way. And it also has the ability, because of its line of sight, to draw bead on either that carrier or the infantry back there. So it might be worth it spraying them with machine gun fire. It can't use its main gun because it moved. It's going to try a shot at the universal carrier just for a bit of fun. It rolls a 1, so machine gun bullets ping off the carrier, but, you know, it was worth a shot. It's funny the moral effect that thing exercises. It hasn't actually killed anybody yet, but it's just the serious threat it represents, which is making me rather nervous. That and the fact that an awful lot of German armour now has decent line of sight on that Cromwell. Right. Back to my third turn. I'm going to get the fire team up here. You can see what I'm doing. With a view to the hopeless scenario victory conditions, I'm gearing my guys up for a mad rush towards the objective. Although, interestingly enough, it's at least as defensible terrain as this former building, now a heap of ruins. So, over to the Germans. This is going to be a quiet activation for them, because it's just going to be that Panzer II coming up to follow the Panther. 2, 3, 4, 5. May as well back them up. There's no point them trying a long shot at the Staghound because its armour is strong enough to resist the machine guns on the Panzer II. So, back to the British, it's turn 4. Now, that Universal Carrier, which is incredibly lucky to have survived, but I don't know what to do with it. That route there is absolutely chocker with German armoured vehicles, so we're not going that way. The only route to any kind of safety for that little fellow is to drive up this way and take a hard left, I think. Yes, that's the only way, really. That's all he can do. He's got nothing that can penetrate the armour on those two, so he's not even going to try. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're going to put pedal to the metal and drive like hell. Last activation for the Germans. One, 2, and set up. Or should they? I suppose it doesn't actually matter whether they're visible or not at this stage, but the Germans will set them up because the whole point of bringing up that Flak 38 was to discourage any British infantry that might be thinking of occupying that position. But of course they can't do any shooting this turn because they've only just wheeled it into position. So over on the British side of things, this fire team is going to go a bit nuts and go 1, 2. Now this may seem a crazy move, but it gets them into that defensible area and it actually takes away the Flak 38's ability to shoot at them because there's a Tiger tank in the way. So I think they've chosen the best spot possible. Plus, ludicrous as it sounds given the overall situation, the British have a toehold on the objective and the Germans do not unless they clear them out. Which brings us back to our German friends for their final activation, and that is Wittmann with his ability to operate independently. Now, foolhardy though it seems, that British move has landed Wittmann with a bit of a tough choice. In order to guarantee a kill, it would be nice if he could concentrate his firepower on one target or another. But as it is, he's got two tempting targets. One is the infantry, and the other is that Cromwell that has defied him for so long. So he is going... There's a whole other turn to deal with the British, so he is going to try and split his fire. He's going to try and take out the Cromwell first. Ooh, and he rolls a 5. So that's a total of 10. Yes, his shot penetrates the frontal armour, and he's got a result of 4. Okay, we are very, very stunned. So a big load of suppression markers go onto the tank. It's not otherwise damaged in any meaningful way, but he has hit it hard, and it's not going to be very happy for a bit. And then his machine guns are going to target that fire team. Oh, and he got a 6. Ouch. Right, so despite their best efforts to wriggle under cover, that poor fire team is getting chopped up by machine gun fire already. And on that horrific note, the Germans end their turn. The British have one more activation. That's that officer in the building. There's very little he can do except close up to his friends over there. But at least they don't have to worry too much about more bits of roof falling on them. That's not likely to happen. So that is it for activations. And as it's the Germans' initiative, the only unit they have that can move in the supply phase is Major Gruber. Now, perhaps the time has come to bring him forward again, given that they're quite keen to cement their own occupation of that objective. So Major Gruber is going to enter the building one more time. Now, how foolhardy is he feeling? How willing is he to take a step out of cover? Because he only moves 3. So if he wants to take over that a space on that fountain, he's going to have to live a bit dangerously. He's not going to do it. They're not going to go for the risk of losing the order token. So Gruber will hold his position. As for the British, all I can think to do is try and get these fellows from that building to this to try and feed the, I was going to call it the meat grinder, but let's not call it that. Let's call it the seizure of the objective. These fellows I'll keep in the house because they can't move quickly enough, and I don't want them to be stuck out in the open. As a final gesture of defiance, the Vickers machine gun team will set up their gun because why not? And actually, do you know what? The 3-inch mortars might as well too. Let's go down fighting, guys. Oh yes, that other Vickers team. 1, 2, 3. You may as well enter the building and set up your gun as well. There's going to be no more rainy days, I don't think. And lastly, that staghound. Given the scale and the quality of what's coming, although I think 1, 2, 3, 4. The staghound is going to make a fight of it because even though it can do nothing to the panther, there's a very faint chance it could discomfit the Panzer II. So Staghound is going to turn at bay and fight. And that is the end of turn 7. And at which point I am going to regrettably have to end this very interesting scenario. So, not quite as catastrophic a turn for the British as I feared it would be, although again they failed to inflict any meaningful damage on the Germans and really have not got anywhere at all. So, it is faintly possible, had the final turn of the game been played, that the British would have won in terms of scenario victory conditions by having perhaps 1 or 2 more squads in the objective by the end of the game. However, I am going to say that because the Germans definitely fought this one better than the British did, it is, to all intents and purposes, I would call this a German victory. The forces were mismatched. I did not expect the Germans to do so well, I must admit, but then on reflection, my infantry especially were mainly geared for fighting other infantry in an urban environment. I'd stocked up on grenades. We had lots of spare grenade counters that we never really got an opportunity to use because, of course, as you can see from the X, they don't do anything meaningful to heavy armor. So aside from my 2 Cromwells and a couple of other units, we really didn't have that much of an anti-tank capability on the British side. And although they give you the options of so equipping your troops, that's a great thing. Unlike some other games, Heroes of Normandy doesn't assume that your infantry have an intrinsic deadly anti-tank capability, unless they're specialist troops that happen to be carrying the right equipment anyway. So it was a bit of a shame. Most of the force I brought to the table for the British didn't really get a chance to show what they could do. But then that happens sometimes in war, I suppose. You you turn up with what you thought was a good force mix, and it turns out not to have been. So, sorry, excuse me. So well done to the Germans with a entirely armour force with no infantry support. They've not only managed to prevent the British from seizing that particular objective within Caen, but they've given them a very bloody nose at the same time. So probably not too dissimilar a result from the from many of the historical outcomes of the very bitter fighting in that city. And yes, in case anyone's wondering, I am going to pull back at this point, dial up HMS Rodney and ask if she can flatten another few acres of an already damaged city. But yes, so I very much enjoyed playing this scenario and putting it together. I really hope all of you have enjoyed watching it, as, or at least have had as much fun watching it as I've had playing it. I hope it's been interesting and useful. And yes, as always, a huge hello and a thank you to my regulars. As always, it's really great to have you guys along. Your company's wonderful, and thank you for the comments. I will be replying to those as soon as I can. To anyone who's new to the channel, if this is your first video, a very warm welcome to you. I hope you'll stick around and maybe check out some of my other Heroes of Normandy videos if that's what brought you here. Otherwise, if you spot any games I've covered that you like the look of, please do feel free to watch those too. You are in any case very welcome. And as always, folks, until I see you all next time, thank you again for tuning in. I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.